So the complaint came in, and my director put me under investigation, and I was put on probation, and HR called me in. I literally felt like I was summoned by the KGB.
Hello, hello, and welcome to Braving It with Tracie Renee, where stories of strength and inspiration are going to help you discover your brave. Let's go. Welcome to Braving It with Tracie Renee. And today I have a good friend of mine, Susana Asberry. Welcome, Susana.
Hello, Tracie. Thank you for having me.
Of course, I'm so glad you could be here. You and I just met not that long ago, actually, but our connection was pretty great right at the beginning. We had a lot in common. And I
Yes.
just knew I had to have you on the show because I want others to hear your inspiration and your story. So, the first question I'm going to ask you is, do you consider yourself to be a brave person?
That's a good question. I consider myself not so much brave, but tough. And I guess when you say tough, so that I guess translates into brave. Yeah, I've been told that, wow, Susanna, you are bold, you said that. So yeah, I guess I am. I guess I am brave in some ways.
Okay, and where do you think that comes from?
Well, I think we both know where. Without our Lord and without Jesus Christ, personally, I don't think I would be brave. He gives me the strength, he gives me the support, and he also, I know that he's with me at all times. So definitely, he's my source of bravery.
Absolutely. And you also had, growing up, a role model in your mother who did something very brave when you were a young girl. Can you tell us about
Yeah,
that?
yes. Yes, I grew up in former Czechoslovakia. This was under the Soviet Union. It was under communism, hardcore communism. And my mother, because she has a German heritage, meaning her father is German, she was able to get a permission to leave and, well, not leave, but visit Germany. And after her visit to Germany, at that time was West Germany, uh, she had decided that I want my children to grow up free, meaning free to practice religion, free to be brave, and free to make, personal choices and decisions, not have the government to dictate everything. So she decided without my father's knowledge. That's another long story, but we were able, long story short, we were able to get out, and she took us to, my sister and me, to Germany. And this was 1976, so I was only 13 at that time.
Wow. Do you remember that pretty clearly?
Oh, yeah, very much so, because I was very much involved in this so-called plan, because we couldn't tell no one that we are going to not just visit, we are going to stay. So that was, we could tell that we're going to visit Germany, visit my grandfather at that time, but my mother and I, we both knew that we are actually going to stay. So that was something we couldn't tell. Nobody. My mother told me at that time, don't even tell your best friend. So I couldn't even tell my best friend. The only person that knew was my grandmother, that we are going to leave and stay. So that was, yeah, definitely. I remember every detail, almost every detail of that journey.
Wow. That's amazing. So let's fast forward a few years when you met your husband. And shortly after you met, you left Germany. So you
Yeah,
talk about a courageous step because you were not that old then. Go ahead and share a little bit about that.
no, that's yeah. So I thought we escaped 1976. So I thought, okay, this is my new country, my new home. I had to learn German from very scratch. The only thing I could say is Dankeschön. That was it. So I had to learn. I had to, go through the culture shock because it was definitely a shock. Um, and then 1979, just 3 years after I met my husband, and at that time, you can calculate, I was 16 when I met him. So, and a year later, he asked me to marry him, and I've decided to go for it. And I was only 17 at that time. So, yes, but this time my mother wasn't with me. This time I was all alone, just me and, well, my Jesus, because I knew when I met my husband, we met at my church in Germany. I knew that he's a man of God, so I trusted Jesus and trusted our Lord that even though I am young, and many people said, "Oh, Susanna, you're crazy," because even at that time, people did not get married that young. Everybody thought I was pregnant. I was like, "No, no, I'm not pregnant." Uh, I knew, again, I had that courage. It was very scary. I still think about the trip because it was a long trip. I had to take a train from Stuttgart to at that time, well, Belgium, Brussels. And from Brussels, I took a plane to New York. I'm not speaking English, very little English, only at that time, I had to learn it in high school, at that time. So it was that high school English all by myself with all the luggage. And then from New York to Phoenix. And then Phoenix was a shock on its own because this was in July and it was 100 something degrees. And I thought, oh my gosh, what had I done? I had my doubts, trust me. I thought, oh my gosh. But I was in love and my husband encouraged me. And before I left, though, he did promise me that I can get education and because that was important to me. And so he reassured me, and of course, lots of prayers and Bible studies. Um, but I knew at that time that for some reason there was a little voice, you go, you go, you go. And now I really understand. Often I think about it and I understand why God told me to go, why I'm not in Germany or in Slovakia at this time. So God had a plan for
Mhm.
sure.
And why is that?
You mean why is it better to be living in the US?
Right.
Well,
Why? Yeah, yes.
there are personal reasons, like my family and what the whole dynamics with my mom remarrying. So God kind of, I think, was trying to save me from all the yet another turmoil, with getting a new man in the life. I was a young girl at that time because I now see what damage it had done to my sister. She was much younger at that time, and I think she still suffers from, the divorce and then new man, new stepdad, so all that. But I thought, wow, God, you took me out of that, to spare me from all the family business, as to say. And then the second reason is as much as you and I know, America is changing, and you and I believe for the worse, the culture, the whole situation here, the political situation. I still think it's a little better than what's going on in Germany and Slovakia. Maybe not as bad as in Germany. It's a small country. But because I have such kind of bad memories of my former country, that's a place that I don't think of like returning. So I still think this country is the best to be, here. So I think God kind of led me here. And then, of course, my husband, when I look at him, God had a plan for him too, to, you know, to deal with me. So, many things.
That's awesome. Okay, so speaking of your husband, you got here, you went to Phoenix, but you guys didn't stay in Phoenix for long. You you went multiple places, but then you ended up in the South, and we neglected to say that your husband was military. So you ended up in the South, and you both had to pull on your big brave panties because living there was difficult at the time. But can you explain why?
Yeah, well, again, looking back, God's hand was just over us over the whole time. We lived in Savannah, Georgia, the first year of our marriage, because as you said, my husband was still in the military. Uh, but not speaking the language, being a white girl married to a black man at that time, there were some looks, and tensions. And surprisingly, not just from white people, it was also from black people. They don't like at that time, didn't like the idea of a white woman being with black men. So sadly to say, that was more so than from the white people. That's my experience as a white girl. Um, but yeah, we've had some challenges. There were some guys, calling my husband names and calling me names. At that time, I barely understood what they called me.
That's probably good,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. But we had a wonderful neighbor who was this big Georgian, I call him this big Georgian white guy. He had that southern accent. I can't say it like he did, but he
That
said,
was pretty
if
good.
those guys give you trouble, just call me and I'm gonna get my shotgun, and he was just so supportive, and they loved us and we loved them. And his wife was very nice. I never forget her southern cooking was very good, just their hospitality. So I cannot say, the South was full of bad people. There were some good, there were some bad, and I believe it's everywhere. Everywhere you go, you're gonna, find some good people and bad people. So yeah, that was a little challenging, but I think, you know, any couple, if I would ask you, there are always some challenges, right? Regardless of where you're from, who you are. But in the end, God was always with us and guiding us and protecting us. So that was the good thing.
That's amazing. So you're still young at this point, right? Maybe 17, 16, maybe 17. So at any time during these struggles, at that point, did you say, I just want to go back home. Take me back.
Yeah. So when we got married, I was 17 and a half. I might stress that.
Okay.
I turned 18, 6 months later. So I was almost 18. But oh, yeah, the first year, the culture shock, the language barrier. And then my husband was in the military. I was home all alone all day. I didn't have a driver's license. I didn't know how to drive yet because in Germany you have to be 18 to drive. Um, and, I left high school, no education, no friends. Archie's family, my husband's family was in Phoenix at that time, so there was nobody. And I felt very lonely. And when you're young, you want to be with people. I wanted to go to school. I wanted to meet people. So yeah, that was really difficult. And I did want to go back. Many times I cried. I was desperate, but God always whispered, you married this guy. You said till death, for better, for worse, till death do you part. So I knew I made a commitment that I had to, it was not about me, but it was more about the commitment that I that I had made not only to my husband, but to my God. So I feared that, how the Bible says, fear the Lord.
Hmm.
I feared him because I made a decision and I knew he was behind me. So I couldn't break that trust and that decision.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. So, one of the commitments or one of the promises that Archie made you was that you would get your education when you got here. So, and you just got done saying at that time you had no education. Now, why don't you tell us what degrees you have and tell us a little bit about the education you got?
Yeah, well, I always wanted to be a teacher. My mother was a teacher. That kind of was in the family, but and so I actually got my GED in Savannah, Georgia. So that was nice. So, months later, my husband enrolled me into some GED classes. At that time, they didn't have ESL classes for non-English speakers. ESL actually came, I think it was maybe a couple of years after I got like 1980 something, or maybe just wasn't around in Georgia. I don't know the details, but so I was enrolled in GED classes, like with students who dropped out of high school and were trying to get their GED. And then after we moved to Arizona, because that is the place where my husband is from, I went to ASU and I got my teaching degree. I got bachelor's degree and then later master's because I knew I needed master's degree if I want to teach college. My aspiration was never PhD and teach at a university. I thought, that's good enough because I had, I wanted to have kids, family. That was more important. So yeah, so that's what I got. I've got, and then after we moved from Arizona, because Arizona just didn't agree with me, and my gracious husband agreed to move from Arizona. I just, we spent 16 years there, but Tracie, everybody said, "Oh, you'll get used to it. You'll get used to the heat." And I just didn't. It's like putting a pine tree into the desert. That was me. I could not get used to it, and it actually was getting worse each year. So my husband finally said, "We have to move." So we moved to Washington, and I went back to school again to SPU and I got my they call it MA TESOL, so teaching English as a second language. So that was something I wanted to do because with the degree teaching, I tried teaching high school, but that wasn't for me. I really have high admiration for high school teachers, but teenagers or kids wasn't, I wanted to teach adults, and that was my goal.
Awesome. So then you got your degree in ESL or teaching English to as a second language, right? Or no,
Mhm.
to
Yes,
non-English. Okay.
yes, that's what they call it, teaching English as a second language. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you got a job at a university up here, University of
Mhm.
Washington. Yeah. And and that was going well for a while. And then again, you had to pull those big girl brave panties on and you had to deal with some things, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
In a nutshell, you tell us about the struggles there and how that went.
Yeah. Well, as I said, I got hired on with master's degree. That's all they required because this was a special program for international students who come to the United States and want to study at a university. So our program was called IEP, Intensive English Program, where we basically prepared the students to take their English test, English proficiency test, so they can study at UW or anywhere else in the United States. Many of them just went through our program and then they went into, universities wherever they got accepted. So it was going very well. This was in 2006, I believe. I think 2004, 2006 when I got hired on. And it's interesting because everybody there knew I was a Christian. Never hid, never, when I was talking to other colleagues, they knew, it was not like I was going around telling everybody I'm a Christian, but when those things came up or when certain issues, I've always said, well, because I'm a Christian, I could not blah, 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 right? So they all knew it. And it was going well for a while until I say, this is, until Obama got in.
Oh boy.
I always tell everybody, Obama, when he said change is coming, change came. The whole department, the whole demeanor, the whole atmosphere just flipped. Suddenly, they were the liberalism, the progressive ideas just really started showing. Until then it was very subtle. And then suddenly it just became so bold and our textbooks and here it is. I'm teaching international students. I always thought, why is that important? All this LGBTQ and all that stuff. So, but again, I was doing my job and then suddenly I'm getting complaints because even students, they knew I was a Christian, because again, when we have some kind of talk in class and they say, "What about you, teacher?" I say, "Well, because I love my God, I believe in God." I never said Jesus, just said God. I would do this, and it was going well until a a student and then other like gay student complained. I didn't know she was gay at that time, but she felt uncomfortable by threatened when, I don't know, because she knew I was a Christian or the lesson that we had when we discussed, for example, I was teaching writing and we were talking about pros and cons, and I was teaching them when you write an argumentative writing, opinion writing, it's good to include both sides of, to show that you are open-minded. And at that time, we were discussing gay marriage, a topic students chose to discuss on because Obama was in. Gay marriage was a hot topic. Uh, she felt threatened, I guess, when we discussed the cons.
Mm.
So it wasn't like, you know, I don't know, but that was tough. And so the complaint came in, and my director put me under investigation and I was put on probation and HR called me in. I literally felt like I was summoned by the KGB.
Mm.
And, at the meeting, questions were asked. Would you teach evolution? Do you bring your Bible? I'm like, what is this? Is the Bible now a forbidden book? Of course, I don't have it in classroom, but I have my Bible on me, and during the break, I read my Bible. I didn't know that was forbidden. That was forbidden in my former country, but suddenly I felt like I was back in my country under the KGB. So it was awful. It was awful, but they didn't fire me because I don't think they could. I had excellent evaluations and these complaints, it's a funny thing. The student who complained said, but she's an excellent teacher, so
Yeah.
uh, they tried, trust me, they tried to fire me. They put me through a workshop. I call it the indoctrination brainwashing workshop that the communists do,
Mm.
where they were talking about race, equity, equality, diversity, and all this stuff. And I thought, wow, wow, wow.
Yeah.
I went there, but I'll tell you a secret. Well, it's not a secret anymore, but when I went through the workshop, I was the one kind of resisting everything. And the people at the table really disliked me. And
Yeah.
I let them know that I don't agree with none of this stuff that it's being taught here in this workshop, that
Mhm.
it is a critical race theory and that it's a Marxist theory that I will never follow. So,
Right. Interesting. I think one of the things I heard that it actually is funny to me now, but at the time it wasn't funny. But
Yes.
one of the accusations they made towards you, one of these students that came to your admin, your director, was that you were racist.
Yeah. So funny, isn't it?
And it's like, how is that? You have a black husband and you have children who are
Like
biracial.
Obama.
Yeah, I so
Yeah.
this is where it gets really, how did you manage through that time? It could not have been easy going to work day after day, knowing these accusations, these false accusations. How
Yeah.
did you make it through?
Well, with lots of prayer, and then my supportive husband. And words cannot hurt. They don't hurt. And I knew that they were not true. I'm not a racist. That's that's ridiculous. And I knew that's like the only thing they've got, right? Because anytime they want to accuse you and they don't have anything, they're going to call you names. So I knew that was just blowing in the wind. And what I did, I just went on every radio station. I made a YouTube video. I made it know that UW is putting me through difficult times, that they are discriminating against me as a Christian, that they actually are doing what they tell us not to do. They were the ones who were not including me into their so-called diversity. They were not including me into their equality or equity, or, all these terms that they throw out. And I thought they're doing what they telling me that I should not be doing. So I went out and I had several radio um, interviews, videos, and so on. So I fought back. I wanted UW to know that I'm not afraid. That I will go public. I was even on, I think it's Channel 7. What is that channel called with the evening news? I
Mhm.
was on there. They kind of mixed up the interview a little bit. You know how they change things, but at least UW knew that I am going on TV and making it known, saying that, please, dear students, do not send your kids to a university that is not doing what they're preaching. So that was my fight back.
Wow. That toughness in you that you talked about earlier, that boldness and toughness. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, where are you now?
I'm in a good place now. I am no longer teaching at the U. I am just, God has blessed me, provided for me. It's interesting that I retired from the university in 2019. And then guess what happened? COVID came, right? And the whole department crumbled. All the teachers left, people lost their jobs. And I thought, oh my gosh, my Lord, this is what my husband said. He said, when you mess with a child of God, this is what happens. So
Wow.
it was like, the vengeance is mine. Now, this might sound like I'm vengeful, but literally 2 quarters later, the department was gone after I had left. So I'm in a good place, not because of that, but I'm just at peace. I, like I said, the Lord had my back and still has my back and will have my back. So that's that's a great question, Tracie.
Amazing. Amazing. We are running out of time here. I just want to ask you if you could give our listeners one piece of advice, what would it be?
Well, be brave, like your channel says. As long as you have the Lord on your side, He is the greatest, the mightiest, the holiest, the strongest. So, what's there to fear? Absolutely nothing. So, when you have thoughts of fear or thoughts of, where you don't want to be brave, look up. and you'll get the bravery. You will feel strong because all these people can't touch you. And even if they do, the Lord is with you.
Amazing. Yes. And on that note, I will thank you, Susana, for being here today. Appreciate it. Everybody, you heard what she said. Look up, be brave. Thank you for tuning in to Braving It with me, Tracie Renee. My hope is that by hearing other stories of brave, it will help propel you forward into doing the same thing. If you've enjoyed this episode, I hope you will follow and subscribe. Until then, remember, brave begets brave. The more you step out in courage, the more courage you will find.